Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and support our new movement by putting Let's Go Viral in the comment section. But if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. But without further ado, here are your hosts, Nicely Chunga Benny and Greg King.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Ball Fake Podcast, members of the Off the Ball Network. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing last night's championship matchup between the UNC Tar Heels and the Kansas Jayhawks. But before we get started with today's episode, if you are new to our YouTube channel or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do me a quick favor by commenting, and subscribing to our YouTube channel and giving us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I would greatly appreciate that. Now, without further ado, let's talk about last night's championship matchup because it was a really good one. And heading into this game, UNC on the season 29-9 record. They defeated Duke in Coach K's last home game, upset the #1 defending champions in Baylor, eliminated Duke in the Final Four, and became one of the few 8 seeds in college basketball history to make it all the way to the national championship game. And they did that all with a first-year head coach. Now, granted, Hubert Davis isn't completely new to college basketball. He has been an assistant under Roy Williams for some time now. But I thought the job that he did for this unit and this team overall, the entire season, was tremendous. But nobody could have predicted this whatsoever. So the UNC Tar Heels should not be feeling any type of way negatively about themselves today, despite last night's loss. And, even for Kansas, this was a team that, hasn't won a championship in quite some time. And, before last night, since cumulative recruiting rankings were first tracked in 2001, no team had won a national title with fewer than 4 top 100 recruits in the rotation. And Kansas ultimately did that last night after they won a national championship. Now let's talk about how things went last night in the first half, right? I thought Kansas did a tremendous job coming in with the game plan that they're going to go at UNC's bigs. Now, heading into this matchup, UNC a little bit banged up, right? Armando Bacot, his MRI came back negative with his sprained ankle. Luckily, he was able to play for the majority of the game. He's a guy who's just dominated this entire tournament. After last night, he became the first player all time to record 6 double-doubles in a single NCAA tournament. Not to mention, he matched David Robinson's Division I single season record of 31 double-doubles, and Bacot also grabbed 99 rebounds, which ranks second all-time for a single tournament. Absolutely tremendous. And he was one of the big staples as to why UNC was able to have such a big lead going into the half. UNC thrived on the offensive glass, and we all know that's because of Armando Bacot's activity around the basket from that perspective. This isn't a guy who's going to kill you and beat you in a half-court setting with him playing with his back against the basket. Not really the most decorated scorer offensively. UNC likes to try stuff. Now, Hubert Davis is one of those coaches in college basketball that's not going to put too many restrictions on his players, specifically his guards, Caleb Love, RJ Davis. He's going to allow those guys to play freely and play their style and brand of basketball. And that's going to be a lot of ill-advised shots. And a lot of people have, been really scrutinizing Caleb Love for his shot selection last night. But ultimately, all the way up until this point, there hasn't been that much of a change in his game offensively. Like I mentioned, this is a guy who just is not that efficient as a scorer. So some of those shots, although a lot of those shots were low percentage shots from that guy, him hitting those shots in all the way up until this point in the entire tournament has been one of the biggest reasons and staples as to why you guys are playing in the national championship game to begin with. So if you're Hubert Davis, you're not going to put too much of a restriction on him from that perspective. Those type of things kind of get in players' heads, especially young guys like Caleb Love, who's only a sophomore in college right now. So with all that stuff being said, I didn't think it would make too much sense to go away from their game plan. Just allow guys like Caleb Love to play freely. Hope that some of his shots go in, because that's ultimately been one of the biggest reasons why they played in last night's national championship game and made it so far this season. Now, granted, they're not the most efficient players in the world, and you saw that on display last night. Caleb Love finished the game 5 of 23. RJ Davis, not that much efficient, in comparison to Caleb Love's production as well. And this isn't a team that's very deep, and neither one of these sides had deep rotations, right? I would have liked to see Bill Self in the first half when Kansas was struggling. Maybe go away from Harris and insert Remy Martin. And obviously, when they made that substitution in the second half, things definitely started to turn around. Remy Martin came off the bench, contributed 14 points off the bench, went 4 of 6 from beyond the arc, and did a great job denying, defending, and, just decimating everything that UNC was trying to do exterior-wise on the perimeter. Now, granted, UNC did a phenomenal job in the first half of just playing inside out. And this is a team that shot 37% from 3 heading into this game. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're getting a lot of great looks on second chance opportunities. We already understand UNC is one of those teams that gives second, third, and sometimes fourth efforts. So it was no surprise to me that they dominated the glass, giving Kansas not really recognized for their interior play. I mean, McCormick is an adequate inside center for the most part, but if he goes up against a big who got similar strength and size to him, he's not going to really be able to outmatch them from that perspective offensively. And that showed a little bit last night, but he had a very efficient game as well. He went 7 of 15 from the field, was a big contributor offensively. And, with the guards struggling, they needed to rely on a guy like McCormick to give them just that little bit of cushion to be able to, bring things back later in the second half. And ultimately, Kansas was able to do that. This Kansas team is so resilient, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you got multiple upperclassmen on this team. Ochai Agbaji, Christian Brown, McCormick, Remy Martin, who's a fifth-year senior, and well coached by Bill Self, obviously. Would have liked to see Harris get himself going a little bit better in terms of, just finishing around the basket. Same thing for Brown. Ochai Agbaji, things looked a little bit deputized from the first half from that perspective, right? But Kansas was able to overcome that 16-point halftime deficit, ultimately going on to win the game. And 16-point deficit ended up being the largest comeback in a national title game all time. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, they got some production in the bench. Remy Martin coming off the bench, giving you 14 points. Although Kansas's front court and a few of their wing guys were in foul trouble, they still did a great job of, just making things harder for UNC in the second half in terms of, defending the guards. And I thought the reason why in the first half Kansas was struggling so much, aside from their guards not being able to knock down shots inside because they were 6 of 21 in the painted area, Kansas, for whatever reason, they were running their offense too much through McCormick. And he's not going to be the guy that is going to win you the basketball game individually. I thought Kansas heading into this game, obviously Ochai Agbaji, Christian Brown, Remy Martin, Harris, much more production and a lot more better quality guards on their side of the basketball as opposed to UNC's. And I felt like that's one of the biggest reasons why they weren't able to, overmatch them in that first half, because they weren't playing through their guards that much. Now, I would like to talk about Manek on UNC's side, because Manek coming into this game, he had 100 points leading into this national championship game throughout the tournament. And in the half-court setting, with UNC not having that many talented scorers, a lot of people might think that Caleb Love, up to this point, is that type of guy, but he's not a natural scorer enough. Inefficient guard, like I mentioned earlier in the episode. I would have liked to see Hubert Davis make an emphasis to get Manek the ball a little bit more. I just don't feel like, he's one of those guys who should have been a primary option offensively heading into tonight's game, aside from Caleb Love. Because you already know, if anything, there's no point of running your offense through Armando Bacot, because he's a guy that's going to get it off the offensive rebound regardless, right? So I would have liked to see Hubert Davis emphasize, getting guys like Manek the basketball a little bit more, because, with his outside shooting and him just being a capable scorer overall at all three levels, he would have opened up the floor a lot more for guys like Caleb Love on driving lanes and RJ Davis as well. But, ultimately they weren't able to take advantage of that feat. But UNC did do a good job throughout the game, making sure that everybody was involved. Leaky Black kind of was the anomaly of the entire situation, because, he had big duties of having to defend Ochai Agbaji on the opposing side of the basketball. And in the first half, he did a tremendous job. In the second half, it was a little bit more of the same, but Kansas's guards, they started to really capitalize on those missed opportunities. And quite frankly, I don't even think UNC's rim protection was that much bothersome for them. And I really like the job that McCormick was doing as far as sealing, Bacot and the rest of those bigs out of the painted area. That way Ochai Agbaji and Brown could get all the way to the rim and have clean looks. But Kansas, they just didn't finish in the first half for whatever reason. They just had a lid on the basket. They just weren't able to capitalize. But ultimately, they were able to get some stops on the other side of the basketball, because UNC in the second half, they started the game 3 of 15. Kansas was able to go on a 12-1 run to cut the deficit to 1. And then from that point on, it was just kind of back and forth. Whoever was going to execute and stick to the game plan, stay disciplined, not being over complacent, was going to win this matchup. And ultimately, Kansas finished the game out on top. McCormick finished with 15. Agbaji finished 4 of 9. 1 of 4 from three-point line. Jalen Wilson shot 5 of 13 from the field, giving you 15 points. And Christian Braun giving you a nice little 12 points off 6 of 14 shooting with 12 rebounds. This is a guy that had a double-double. 11 of those rebounds were defensive. So, these guys were just buying in on both sides of the basketball, and ultimately was one of the biggest reasons as to why this team is now national champions. But hey, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section. Did you expect UNC to come out in last night's game as national title champions, or were you rocking with the Kansas Jayhawks the entire time? But outside of that, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode with me here on the Ball Fake Podcast. If you're new to our YouTube channel or listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, do me a quick favor by commenting, subscribing, turn on post notification, and giving us a 5-star rating and a nice review. But besides that, it's your boy Nicey Chunga Benny. You're listening to the Ball Fake Podcast, and we out. Praise God.